Jack Holden stopped breathing the second she stepped down from that carriage. Not because of the dust swirling around her boots, or the way the afternoon sun caught her hair, but because in that single moment, standing in the middle of Cactus Hill, with her chin raised and her eyes scanning the crowd, she became the only woman he would ever love. And she'd come to marry Henry Williamson. "That's her," Samuel whispered beside him. "The Philadelphia bride." Jack couldn't respond, couldn't move. His heart was already gone, stolen by a woman whose name he didn't even know yet, a woman promised to another man, a woman who would destroy his carefully constructed solitary life without ever knowing she'd done it. She turned and their eyes met across the dusty street. Everything Jack had believed about love, about safety, about keeping his heart locked away, shattered in the space between one heartbeat and the next. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and stay with me until the very end. Comment which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 3 weeks earlier, Jack had been mending fence posts when Samuel rode up with news that would change everything. "There's a woman coming to town," Samuel said, dismounting with the kind of excitement Jack rarely saw in his old friend. "Henry Williamson's bride." Jack barely looked up from his work. "Good for Henry. She's from Philadelphia, mail order arrangement. Her father's some kind of merchant who needs Williamson's money, and Henry needs her father's business connections. Still don't see what that has to do with me." Samuel grinned. "Nothing. Except you're the only man in Cactus Hill who doesn't gossip like a hen, so I figured you'd be safe to talk to without the whole town hearing about it by sundown." Jack hammered another nail. "Appreciate the confidence." But Samuel wasn't wrong about the town's reaction. By the time Eliza Matthews arrived 2 days later, every soul in Cactus Hill had turned out to see her. Jack only went because Samuel had convinced him they needed supplies from the general store, and the general store happened to be right across from where Henry Williamson waited with his carriage. Jack had seen plenty of women in his 32 years. Beautiful women, plain women who could work a field as hard as any man, and women who couldn't lift a bucket without fainting. He'd stopped noticing them years ago, after Sarah Connolly married the banker's son and left him standing alone at the church social, deciding then and there that love was for fools who had time to waste on broken hearts. Then Eliza stepped down from that carriage. She wasn't what Jack expected. Henry had described her in letters as refined and suitable, which Jack had taken to mean cold and proper. But the woman who planted her boots in the Cactus Hill dust and looked around with sharp assessing eyes was anything but cold. "Mr. Williamson," she said, and even her voice was different, not soft and delicate, but clear and direct. Henry stepped forward, hat in hand, looking more nervous than Jack had ever seen him. "Miss Matthews, welcome to Cactus Hill." "Thank you." She didn't smile. "Is there somewhere I can wash up? The journey was long." Of course. I've arranged rooms for you at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house until we're married." "How thoughtful." Still no smile. Jack turned to leave, but Samuel elbowed him. "Look at her," Samuel whispered. "She's going to eat Henry alive." "Not our problem," Jack muttered, but he couldn't help watching as Eliza refused Henry's offered arm and walked toward the boarding house on her own, her spine straight and her chin high. That should have been the end of it. Jack should have gone back to the ranch, back to his fence posts and his solitary life, and let Henry Williamson deal with his Philadelphia bride. But the universe had other plans. The next morning, Jack was loading supplies onto his wagon when he heard a commotion from the livery stable. Voices raised, someone swearing, and then, "I said I want to rent a horse, not receive a lecture on what ladies should and shouldn't do." Jack recognized that voice. He shouldn't have walked over. Every instinct told him to mind his own business, but his feet carried him toward the stable anyway. Tom Baker, who ran the livery, stood red-faced and stubborn in front of Eliza Matthews. "Miss, I can't in good conscience let you ride out alone. Mr. Williamson would have my hide." "Mr. Williamson doesn't own me yet," Eliza said, her eyes flashing. And I'm perfectly capable of riding a horse without a chaperone. It ain't about capability, miss. It's about propriety. Propriety can go straight to, "Everything all right here?" Jack heard himself say. Both of them turned. Tom looked relieved. Eliza looked annoyed. "Mr. Holden," Tom said quickly, "maybe you can explain to Miss Matthews here that a lady doesn't ride out alone in these parts." Jack looked at Eliza, really looked at her for the first time. She had brown eyes that held sparks of gold in the morning light, and a jawline set with determination. Her riding outfit was expensive but practical, and her boots were broken in not the decorative kind city women wore. "You know how to ride?" Jack asked her directly. "Since I was 6 years old," Eliza said. "I may be from Philadelphia, but I'm not helpless." "Didn't say you were." Jack turned to Tom. "Saddle up Daisy for the lady. I'll ride out with her." Tom's eyes widened. "You will?" "Unless Miss Matthews objects." Eliza studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't need a nursemaid, Mr. Holden, Jack Holden, and I'm not offering to be one. But Tom's right about one thing. There are coyotes and rattlers out there, and it's better to have someone along who knows the territory." He paused. "Unless you'd rather wait for your fiancé to take you." Her mouth tightened. "Mr. Williamson is busy with business matters, and I prefer not to wait." "Then we leave in 10 minutes. He didn't wait for her response, just walked away to get his horse. Behind him, he heard Tom stammering something about Mr. Williamson not being happy, and Eliza's sharp reply, "Then Mr. Williamson can take it up with me." They rode out in silence, heading toward the ridge that overlooked the valley. Jack didn't try to make conversation, and Eliza seemed content with the quiet. She sat her horse well. He noticed no awkward bouncing or nervous clutching at the reins. Whatever else she was, she hadn't lied about knowing how to ride. After about 20 minutes, she spoke. "Why did you help me back there?" Jack considered lying, giving her some polite answer about being neighborly. But something about her directness made him match it. "Because Tom was being stubborn, and you looked like you were 2 seconds from punching him." A small smile cracked her serious expression. "I was considering it. Would have been entertaining to watch, but Tom's got a glass jaw. One hit, and you'd have laid him out cold, and then where would that leave you?" "Satisfied," she said, and Jack felt something unexpected. A laugh working its way up from his chest. It had been so long since he'd laughed that it surprised him. "What made you want to ride out here anyway?" he asked. "Most women who come to Cactus Hill want to stay as close to civilization as possible." "Most women who come to Cactus Hill probably chose to come here," Eliza said quietly. "I didn't have a choice." Jack didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They rode on, and after a while, Eliza spoke again. "My father lost everything in a bad investment. Everything. The house, the business, our family's reputation. Henry Williamson offered a way out. Marry me, combine our family names, and he'd invest enough money to save my father from complete ruin. And you agreed. What else could I do? Let my father lose everything. Watch my mother and sister live in poverty." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "At least this way I'm useful." "That's a hell of a way to think about marriage." "What would you know about it?" she shot back. "Are you married, Mr. Holden?" "No." "Ever been close?" "Once. Didn't work out." "Then you understand." She urged her horse forward. "Sometimes life doesn't give us the choices we want. It only gives us the ones we can live with." They rode in silence again, but Jack couldn't shake her words. The ones we can live with. What a sad way to measure a life. When they reached the ridge, Eliza pulled her horse to a stop and stared out at the valley below. The land stretched endlessly brown and gold and green where the creek cut through. The sky was impossibly big, the kind of sky that made people feel small and significant all at once. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I didn't expect it to be beautiful." "What did you expect?" Dust. Desperation. The end of everything I knew. She turned to look at him. But this is something else. Jack looked at the valley, trying to see it through her eyes. He'd lived here his whole life. It was just home. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd stopped seeing it. Your fiancé's land runs from here to that far tree line, Jack said, pointing. Good grazing, reliable water. He's built something solid. Is that supposed to make me feel better about marrying a stranger? I'm just stating facts, Miss Matthews. Well, here's a fact for you, Mr. Holden. I don't love him. I don't even like him particularly. But I'll marry him anyway because that's what dutiful daughters do. Her voice cracked slightly. And then I'll spend the rest of my life pretending it's enough. Jack should have left it alone. Should have kept his mouth shut and escorted her back to town and never thought about her again. But he didn't. Doesn't have to be that way, he said. She laughed bitterly. Yes, it does. Unless you know of another wealthy landowner looking for a broke Philadelphia merchant's daughter. I meant, maybe love isn't completely off the table. People have married for less than love and found it anyway. Is that what happened with your almost marriage? You found love after the arrangement? No, Jack admitted. I found heartbreak. But that doesn't mean it can't work differently for someone else. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You're kinder than you pretend to be, Mr. Holden. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain. She smiled then, a real smile that changed her whole face. Your secret's safe with me. They rode back to town, and Jack told himself that was the end of it. He'd done his neighborly duty, helped a stranger, and now he could go back to his life. But 3 days later, Eliza showed up at his ranch. Jack was shoeing a horse when he heard the rider approach. He looked up expecting Samuel or one of the ranch hands, and froze when he saw Eliza dismounting. Miss Matthews, he said, straightening. Everything all right? I need to ask you something, she said, walking toward him with that same determined stride. And I need you to answer honestly. All right. Do you think I'm making a mistake? Jack set down his tools. What kind of question is that? An honest one. You're the only person in this town who doesn't have a stake in my marriage to Henry. You're not getting business from it. You're not gaining social standing. You're not involved in any way. So I'm asking you, do you think I'm making a mistake? He should have told her what she wanted to hear, that she was doing the right thing, that duty and family came first, that love was overrated anyway. Instead, he said, I think you're about to lock yourself into a life you don't want with a man you don't love, and I think you'll regret it every day for the rest of your life. She flinched like he'd slapped her. That's what I thought you'd say. Then why did you ask? Because I needed to hear it from someone who wasn't trying to convince me to stay or leave for their own benefit. She walked to the corral fence and leaned against it. Henry's a good man. He's kind, he's wealthy, he'll provide for me. Most women would be grateful. But you're not most women. No, she agreed. I'm not. Jack joined her at the fence. What do you want, Eliza? It was the first time he'd used her first name, and they both felt the weight of it. I want to matter, she said quietly. I want to wake up every morning and feel like my life means something beyond being decorative and obedient. I want to work with my hands and feel the sun on my face and make my own choices. She turned to him. I want what you have. I don't have much. You have freedom. That's worth more than all of Henry's money. Jack didn't know what to say to that. Freedom. He'd never thought of his life that way, just lonely mostly. But maybe Eliza was right. Maybe what he'd called loneliness was actually freedom, and he'd been too stupid to appreciate it. You could still choose differently, he said carefully. It's not too late. Yes, it is. The wedding is in 2 weeks. The invitations are sent. The dress is being altered. My father's business deal depends on this marriage happening. She smiled sadly. Some cages are made of gold, Mr. Holden, but they're still cages. She left after that, and Jack stood at the corral fence for a long time, watching the dust settle where her horse had been. Over the next week, he saw her 3 more times. Once at the general store where she was ordering supplies with Henry and caught Jack's eye across the room. Once at the church social where she danced with Henry while Jack stood against the wall nursing a drink he didn't want. And once on the road where they passed each other on horseback and exchanged nods but no words. Each time Jack felt something pulling tighter in his chest. Something that felt uncomfortably like hope and dangerously like heartbreak. Samuel noticed, of course. "You're getting attached," he said one night when they were playing cards at Jack's kitchen table. "Don't know what you're talking about." "The Philadelphia woman, Eliza, you're getting attached. She's engaged to Henry Williamson. That's not a denial." Jack threw down his cards. "What do you want me to say, Sam? That I think about her? That I can't stop thinking about her? Fine. But it doesn't matter because in 1 week she's going to marry Henry and that'll be the end of it. Unless you do something about it. Like what? Ride up to Henry's house and tell him I've fallen for his fiancée. That'll go over real well." "I'm not saying you should do that," Samuel said carefully. "I'm saying you should tell her. Let her know she's got a choice. She already knows her choices. She's made her decision." "Has she?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she's doing what she thinks she has to do, not what she wants to do." Samuel leaned forward. "Jack, I've known you since we were kids. I've never seen you like this. Not even with Sarah. This is different." "Exactly. So don't let it end before it even starts." But Jack couldn't bring himself to do anything. What could he offer Eliza that Henry couldn't? A small ranch, a hard life, uncertainty. Henry could give her security, stability, everything her family needed. Jack could only give her himself, and that had never been enough for anyone before. The day before the wedding, Jack decided to leave town. He'd ride out to the western range, check on the cattle, and not come back until after Eliza was safely married and out of his life. It was the coward's way out, but he didn't care. He couldn't stand there and watch her marry another man. He was packing his saddlebags when someone knocked on his door. It was Eliza. She stood on his porch in a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she asked. Jack stepped aside, his heart hammering against his ribs. She walked into his small cabin, looking around at the sparse furniture, the simple life he'd built. "Why are you here, Eliza?" She turned to face him. "Because tomorrow I'm going to marry Henry Williamson, and I needed to see you one more time before I did." "That's not fair." "I know." Her voice broke slightly. "But I don't know how else to say goodbye to something that never even started." Jack crossed the room in 3 steps and took her hands. "Then don't say goodbye. Don't marry him." "Jack, I know I can't offer you what he can. I know I'm just a rancher with nothing but land and cattle and a life that's harder than anything you've known. But Eliza, I can offer you something he never will." "What's that?" "A choice. Every single day you'd have a choice. To stay or go. To love me or leave me. To build a life that's yours, not something someone else decided for you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're asking me to give up everything." "I'm asking you to choose yourself," Jack said. "For once in your life, choose what you want, instead of what everyone else needs." She pulled her hands free and stepped back. "I can't. My father. Your father will find another way, but you won't. This is your one chance, Eliza. Tomorrow, you'll stand in that church and promise yourself to a man you don't love, and every day after that will be a day you wished you'd chosen differently." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I chose wrong once, and I've regretted it every day since." Eliza wiped her tears. "What are you saying?" Jack took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would either save him or destroy him. "I'm saying I love you. I've loved you since the first moment I saw you refuse to be anything less than exactly who you are. And I know it's crazy, and I know it's fast, and I know I have no right to ask this of you. but I'm asking anyway." He moved closer. "Don't marry Henry. Marry me." The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Finally, Eliza spoke. "If I say yes, my father loses everything. If you say no, you lose yourself. How can you ask me to choose between my family and my own happiness?" "I'm not asking you to choose," Jack said gently. "Life is. I'm just offering to be there when you make your decision." Eliza stood there trembling, caught between two futures. Jack could see the war raging behind her eyes, duty versus desire, obligation versus freedom. "I need time," she whispered. "You have until tomorrow." She left without another word, and Jack spent the longest night of his life wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his own. Morning came cold and gray. Jack didn't sleep. He sat on his porch watching the sun rise over the valley, knowing that somewhere in town, Eliza was making her choice. By 10 o'clock, he knew what that choice had been. Samuel rode up, his face grim. "The wedding's starting in an hour. Everyone in town's heading to the church." Jack nodded. He'd expected this. Hoped against it, but expected it. "You going?" Samuel asked. "No." Jack. "She made her choice, Sam. I have to respect that." Samuel dismounted and sat next to him on the porch steps. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I knew it was a long shot." They sat in silence, two old friends who'd seen enough of life to know that sometimes the stories didn't end the way you wanted them to. Then, in the distance, they heard hoofbeats. Fast, urgent hoofbeats. Jack stood, his heart suddenly racing. A rider was coming up the road, a single rider moving like the devil was chasing them. It was Eliza. She pulled her horse to a stop in front of his porch. Breathing hard, her wedding dress hitched up around her knees, her veil trailing behind her like a ghost. "I couldn't do it," she gasped. "I got dressed, I walked to the church, I stood in that doorway, and I couldn't do it." Jack couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Eliza, you were right, about all of it. I was about to trade my entire life for my father's comfort, and I realized—" She dismounted, stumbling slightly in her elaborate dress. "I realized that if I did that, I wouldn't just be losing you. I'd be losing myself. What about your family? My father will survive. He's survived worse. But I won't survive a life without love, Jack. I won't survive marrying a man I don't care for just to make everyone else comfortable." She walked up the porch steps, still in that ridiculous wedding dress, and took his face in her hands. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose me." And then she kissed him, and Jack felt something inside him that he thought had died years ago suddenly come roaring back to life. When they finally broke apart, Samuel was grinning like a fool. "Well," he said, "I guess I better ride into town and let them know the wedding's off." "Wait," Eliza said. "Tell them the wedding's still on, just with a different groom." Jack stared at her. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She smiled that brilliant smile that had captured his heart from the very beginning. "Unless you've changed your mind." "Not a chance in hell," Jack said, and kissed her again. The story that spread through Cactus Hill that day was one for the ages. The Philadelphia bride who ran from her own wedding. The quiet rancher who'd stolen Henry Williamson's fiancée. The scandal that would fuel gossip for years. But Jack and Eliza didn't care about any of that. They stood in the church that afternoon, surrounded by the few friends brave enough to witness their impromptu wedding, and promised themselves to each other. Not because they had to. Not because anyone else needed them to. But because they chose to. And as Jack slipped a simple band onto Eliza's finger, nothing like the elaborate ring Henry had commissioned, he understood something he'd never understood before. Love wasn't about what you could offer someone. It wasn't about security or status or doing the right thing for everyone else. It was about two people choosing each other every single day, even when the world said they shouldn't. Especially when the world said they shouldn't. That night, they sat on the porch of Jack's cabin, their cabin now, and watched the stars come out. Eliza still wore her wedding dress, now dusty and torn at the hem, and Jack had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Eliza leaned against him. "Ask me in 50 years. "I will." And somewhere in the distance, the coyotes howled, and the wind whispered through the grass, and two people who'd found each other against all odds began the rest of their lives. The stars were still out when reality came knocking the next morning in the form of Henry Williamson himself. Jack heard the horse before he saw it, and he was already on his feet moving toward the door when Henry dismounted. Eliza stirred behind him, still half asleep in their bed. "Stay inside," Jack said quietly. "Like hell I will." She was up pulling on her robe, her hair wild around her shoulders. "This is my mess. I'll face it." Henry stood in the yard, his face carved from stone. He didn't yell, didn't rage. That somehow made it worse. "I want to hear it from her," Henry said, his voice deadly calm. "I want to hear Eliza tell me to my face that she chose you." Jack stepped aside, and Eliza walked out onto the porch. "I chose him," she said simply. "I'm sorry, Henry, but I chose him." Henry's jaw worked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father's deal is dead. The money I promised gone. His business will collapse within 6 months. Eliza flinched but held her ground. "I know." "You know." Henry laughed bitterly. "You know, and you did it anyway." "Yes." "Why, what can he possibly give you that I can't?" Henry gestured at Jack's modest cabin, his small ranch. "I could have given you everything. Security, comfort, a name that matters in this territory." "But you couldn't give me love," Eliza said softly. "And I couldn't give it to you either. We would have been miserable together, Henry. You know it as well as I do." "I would have tried." "I know you would have. And that's what makes this so hard." Eliza moved to the porch railing. "You're a good man, Henry. You deserve someone who looks at you the way I look at Jack. Someone who chooses you not because they have to, but because they can't imagine choosing anyone else." Henry stood silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Jack. "You better be worth it, Holden. You better be worth destroying her family for." "I'll spend every day trying to be," Jack said. Henry mounted his horse. "Her father's arriving tomorrow. Thought she should know." He rode off, and Eliza sagged against the porch post. Jack caught her before she fell. "He's right," she whispered. "What have I done?" "You chose yourself," Jack said. "And we'll figure out the rest together." But the next day, when Marcus Matthews arrived in Cactus Hill, Jack realized together was going to be harder than he'd thought. Marcus was everything Jack expected, tall, distinguished, with cold eyes that assessed Jack in a single glance and found him wanting. "You," he said, pointing at Jack. "Outside. Now." They stood in the yard, while Eliza watched from the window, her face pale. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. 15 years building relationships with Williamson. 15 years of careful negotiation. And my daughter throws it all away for what, a cowboy with dirt under his nails? "Sir." "Don't sir me. You seduced my daughter. Turned her against her own family. Against everything we planned for her." "I didn't seduce anyone," Jack said, his own anger rising. "Eliza made her own choice. Eliza is 23 years old. She doesn't know what she wants." "Yes, I do." Eliza came out, her voice ringing clear. "I know exactly what I want, Father. And it's not a marriage of convenience to save your business mistakes." Marcus turned on her. "My business mistakes? Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it? I was trying to secure your future, to make sure you'd never want for anything. I never wanted money, Father. I wanted a father who asked me what I dreamed about instead of telling me what to do." Eliza's voice broke. "I wanted to matter as something more than a bargaining chip." Marcus stared at her, and something in his face crumbled. "You think I don't care about you. I think you care about me the way you care about a good investment. Carefully, strategically. But not— She stopped, tears streaming down her face. Not the way a father should. Eliza. When did you last ask me what I wanted, Father? When did you last care about my happiness instead of my usefulness? Marcus had no answer. He looked at Jack, then back at his daughter, and Jack saw defeat settle over him like a shroud. You've made your choice, Marcus said quietly. I hope it was worth it. He left, and Eliza collapsed into Jack's arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. He'll never forgive me, she gasped. My own father will never forgive me. Give him time, Jack said, but he wasn't sure he believed it. The next week brought more consequences. The town split down the middle. Some people thought Eliza was brave, most thought she was a fool. Mrs. Henderson refused to speak to her. The general store owner charged them double for supplies. Even the minister looked at them with disapproval when they came to church. They hate us, Eliza said one night, staring out the window at the dark. They don't know us, Jack corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because it feels the same. Jack pulled her close. You want to know what I think? What? I think people are always going to have opinions about what we did. Some will understand, most won't. But that doesn't change the fact that we're here together, and that's all that matters. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. The rest of the world that's complicated. But us, this simple as breathing. Eliza turned in his arms and kissed him. I love you, Jack Holden. I love you too. But love Jack was learning didn't pay bills or mend fences or make the drought end. 3 weeks into their marriage, Samuel rode up with news that made Jack's stomach drop. The bank's calling in your loan, Samuel said, dismounting. Early repayment. Full amount due in 60 days. That's not possible. I've got 2 years left on that loan. Henry Williamson sits on the bank board. Samuel didn't need to say more. Jack felt rage building in his chest. He's trying to take the ranch. He's trying to punish you, and Eliza. Jack looked at the cabin where Eliza was washing dishes, humming softly to herself, finally starting to look happy again. How much do I need? $1,500. Jack had maybe $200 in savings. The cattle weren't ready to sell for another 4 months. He'd never raised that kind of money in 60 days. I'm ruined, he said quietly. Not yet, you're not. Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. We'll figure something out. But 2 days later, when Jack told Eliza about the loan, her face went white. This is my fault, she whispered. Henry's doing this because of me. Henry's doing this because he's a vindictive bastard, Jack said. That's not on you. Everything's on me. My father's business is failing. Your ranch is in jeopardy. I've destroyed everything I've touched. Eliza, no. She stood pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. I was so selfish. I thought I could just choose love and everything else would work out, but it doesn't work that way, does it? Love doesn't pay debts. Love doesn't save businesses. Love doesn't— Jack grabbed her shoulders. Stop it. Stop doing this to yourself. Why? It's true. No, it's not. You didn't destroy anything. You saved yourself. And yeah, there are consequences to that, but we'll handle them. Together. How? How are we going to raise $1,500 in 2 months? Jack didn't have an answer. But that night, lying awake while Eliza slept fitfully beside him, he made a decision. The next morning, he rode into town and went straight to Henry Williamson's office. Henry looked up from his paperwork, his expression cold. Come to beg. Come to make a deal, Jack said. Call off the bank, and I'll find a way to pay you back what you lost on Eliza's father's business deal. You don't have that kind of money. I will. Give me a year. I'll work double, sell everything I can spare, and pay you every cent you're owed. Henry leaned back in his chair. Why would I do that? Because you're not as cruel as you're pretending to be, Jack said. You're hurt. You're angry. I get it. But taking my ranch won't bring Eliza back. It'll just make 3 people miserable instead of 1. She chose you over everything. Why should I care if you suffer for it? Because you loved her once, Jack said quietly. Or you thought you did. And somewhere in that heart of yours you know she deserves better than a husband who'd destroy her happiness out of spite. Henry was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You've got nerve, Holden. I'll give you that." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe. Come back tomorrow. I'll have my answer then." Jack left his heart pounding. He'd gambled everything on Henry having a shred of decency left. When he got home, Eliza was waiting on the porch. "Where were you?" He told her everything, watched her face cycle through shock, anger, and something that looked like hope. "You went to Henry for me," she said softly. "I went to Henry for us." "What if he says no? Then we'll figure out something else." But the next day, when Jack returned to Henry's office, the answer wasn't what he expected. "I'll call off the bank," Henry said. "But not because of your deal. Because Eliza's father came to see me this morning." Jack's heart stopped. "What?" "Marcus Matthews offered to sign over his remaining business assets to me. Every last piece, in exchange for leaving you and Eliza alone." "He did what?" "He said." Henry paused, something flickering across his face. "He said his daughter's happiness was worth more than his pride, that he'd failed her as a father, and the least he could do was not let his mistakes destroy her future." Jack couldn't speak. "So the loan's forgiven," Henry continued. "Consider it a wedding present from your father-in-law. God knows the man can't afford much else now." Jack rode back to the ranch in a daze. When he told Eliza, she broke down completely. "He gave up everything," she sobbed. "Everything. For me." "For us," Jack corrected gently. "I have to see him. I have to—" "He left town this morning," Jack said. "Henry told me. He's going back to Philadelphia to start over." No, I can't let him leave like this. Not without—" She was already running for the stable, and Jack ran after her. They rode into town together, desperate to catch Marcus before he left. They found him at the train station, his bags already loaded. "Father," Eliza called, dismounting so fast she nearly fell. Marcus turned, and the look on his face, surprise, pain, love, made Jack's chest ache. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" "What am I, Father? What you did, giving up everything, was my choice," Marcus said firmly. "Just like marrying Jack was yours." "But your business—" "Can be rebuilt. You can't." "Whoa." He reached out and touched her face, a gesture so tender it made Eliza start crying all over again. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry I made you feel like a commodity instead of my daughter. I'm sorry I put money before your happiness. I'm sorry for all of it." "I forgive you," Eliza whispered. "But you can't leave, not like this. Stay, please." Marcus shook his head. "I can't. There's nothing left for me here. But you have everything. A husband who loves you. A life you chose. That's more than most people ever get." "I need you, Father." "No, you don't. Not anymore." He smiled sadly. "But maybe someday when I've rebuilt what I lost, I'll come back. And you can introduce me to my grandchildren." The train whistle blew. Marcus kissed Eliza's forehead, shook Jack's hand, and boarded without looking back. Eliza watched the train disappear into the distance, tears streaming down her face. Jack held her while she cried, and somewhere in that moment, he understood the true cost of love. It wasn't free. It never had been. Love demanded sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to hurt the people you cared about in the name of being true to yourself. "He'll come back," Jack said quietly. "Your father, he'll come back." "How do you know?" "Because he loves you, and love always finds a way home." They rode back to the ranch in silence, both of them changed by what they'd witnessed. Marcus's sacrifice had saved them, but it had also shown them something fundamental about the choice they'd made. Love wasn't just about the two people choosing each other. It was about everyone around them learning to accept that choice, to forgive it, to move forward despite the damage it caused. That night, lying in bed, Eliza said, "Do you ever regret it?" Regret what? Asking me to marry you, knowing everything it would cost. Jack pulled her closer. Never. Not for a single second. Even now, with everything that's happened. Especially now. Because now I know for sure that you're worth it. That we're worth it. He kissed her temple. Besides, your father was right about one thing. What's that? We're going to have beautiful grandchildren. Eliza laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. You're already thinking about grandchildren. Why not? We've got time. We've got a ranch to save bills to pay a town that hates us, and about 3 friends between us. So we'll work hard, pay our bills, win over the town, and make more friends. Jack grinned. How hard can it be? As it turned out, very hard. The next month brought challenge after challenge. The drought got worse. 2 of their cattle died from disease. The roof started leaking. And just when Jack thought things couldn't get any worse, Samuel showed up with news that made his blood run cold. There's talk, Samuel said carefully, about Eliza. What kind of talk? People saying she seduced you. That she's a gold digger who played Henry and you both. That she's manipulative and calculating and... Stop. Jack's hands clenched into fists. Who's saying this? Does it matter? Half the town believes it. Jack looked at the cabin where Eliza was hanging laundry, singing softly to herself, despite everything. Yes, he said quietly. It matters, because whoever's spreading those lies is going to answer to me. But when he confronted the source, Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, she didn't back down. It's not a lie if it's true, she said primly. That girl destroyed 2 good men's lives for her own selfish desires. She chose love over obligation. Jack shot back. That's not selfish. That's brave. It's reckless. And mark my words, Jack Holden, you'll regret the day you ever laid eyes on her. Jack left before he said something he'd regret. But that night, when Eliza asked why he looked so angry, he couldn't bring himself to tell her. How could he explain that the town had turned her into a villain? That people who didn't know her, who'd never spoken to her, had decided she was the worst kind of woman? Jack, Eliza pressed. What's wrong? Nothing, just tired. She didn't believe him, he could tell. But she didn't push. And that Jack thought was maybe the hardest part of all. Eliza was strong enough to handle the truth, but he loved her too much to burden her with every cruel word, every hateful glance, every whispered accusation that followed them through town. So he carried it alone, and tried not to let it break him. But one morning, 3 months after their wedding, everything changed. Jack was in the barn when he heard shouting from the house. He ran back to find Eliza standing in the doorway, her face lit with joy. What is it? She held up a letter. It's from my father. He's found work in Philadelphia. A new business partner. And he's sending money, not much, but enough to help us get through the rest of the season. Jack took the letter, reading Marcus's careful handwriting. At the bottom, a single line made his throat tight. Tell my daughter I'm proud of her. Tell her I finally understand. He understands. Eliza whispered, fresh tears spilling over. He finally understands. Jack pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in months, he felt something that had been missing since that day they'd ridden away from her father at the train station. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of people trying to survive, but the real thing. The kind that said, maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it after all. That hope lasted exactly 4 days. Jack was fixing the fence line when he saw riders approaching 3 men he didn't recognize, all wearing badges. Jack Holden, the lead man called out. That's me. I'm Deputy Marshal Carson. These are my associates. We need to ask you some questions about Henry Williamson. Jack's stomach dropped. What about him? He's been accused of fraud, bank fraud specifically, and your name came up in our investigation. Eliza appeared from the house, her face going pale. What's happening? Ma'am, I'd advise you to stay inside, Carson said. Like hell I will. She came to stand beside Jack. What's this about? Carson dismounted, pulling out a notebook. Mr. Williamson's been running a scheme for the past 3 years. Falsifying loan documents, embezzling from depositors, using bank funds for personal investments. When it all started falling apart, he tried to cover his tracks by calling in legitimate loans early, including yours, Mr. Holden. I don't understand, Jack said. What does that have to do with me? You were one of the last people to meet with Williamson before he disappeared. We need to know what you discussed. Disappeared. Eliza's voice cracked. Henry's gone. Left town 3 nights ago. Took whatever money he could carry and ran. Carson looked at Jack hard. So I'll ask you again. What did you discuss? Jack told them everything. The loan, the deal with Marcus Henry's decision to forgive the debt. Carson wrote it all down, his expression unreadable. And you didn't think it was suspicious? Carson asked. A man forgives $1,500 just like that. I thought he was being decent, Jack said. Guess I was wrong. After the marshals left, Eliza sank onto the porch steps. This is my fault, all of it. If I hadn't... Stop. Jack sat beside her. Henry made his own choices. But he wouldn't have made them if I hadn't humiliated him. If I hadn't... You didn't make him steal from the bank, Eliza. That's on him. But 3 days later, when Carson returned with more news, Jack realized the situation was worse than he'd thought. We've been going through Williamson's records, Carson said. Turns out your loan was never legitimate in the first place. He created it using forged documents and embezzled bank funds to give you the money. Jack felt the world tilt. What are you saying? I'm saying legally you never had a loan, which means you don't own this ranch. The actual deed is still in Williamson's name, and since he's a fugitive, the bank's seizing all his assets. No. The word came out strangled. No, I've been paying on this land for 3 years. I've built everything here. You can't just... I'm sorry, Mr. Holden, but the law's clear. You've got 30 days to vacate. When Carson left, Jack stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just heard. Everything, his home, his livelihood, his entire life gone because Henry Williamson had been a fraud. Eliza grabbed his arm. We'll fight this. We'll get a lawyer. We'll... With what money? Jack's voice came out hollow. We barely have enough to eat. How are we going to pay a lawyer? Then we'll sell something. The cattle, We don't own the cattle, Eliza. We don't own anything. It's all Henry's. He laughed bitterly. Hell, we probably don't even own the clothes on our backs. That night, Jack didn't come to bed. Eliza found him in the barn, sitting in the dark, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. Jack, go inside, Eliza. No. I said, go inside. His voice cracked. I need to be alone right now. Well, that's too bad because you don't get to be alone. Not anymore. We're married, remember? Which means when you hurt, I hurt. When you break, I break. She sat beside him in the dirt. So if you're going to fall apart, you're going to do it with me here. Jack was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I can't give you anything. Not security, not comfort, not even a roof over your head. What kind of husband does that make me? The kind who's forgotten that I didn't marry you for security or comfort or a roof. I married you because I love you. She took the bottle from his hands. And love doesn't disappear just because things get hard. Things aren't just hard, Eliza. They're impossible. No, they're not. They're just... She stopped and Jack saw her face change. Wait. What if we could prove the land was yours before Henry forged the documents? How? I don't have any papers, any proof. But someone does. Your father built this ranch, didn't he? There must be original deeds, land grants, something that shows your family's claim predates Henry's fraud. Jack sat up straighter. My father's papers are in a bank in Silver Creek. He stored them there when he got sick, said they'd be safer than keeping them at the ranch. Then we ride to Silver Creek tomorrow and get them. It's a 2-day ride. Then we better leave early. They set out at dawn, pushing hard across the territory. Jack hadn't been to Silver Creek in 5 years, not since his father died, and the memories that surfaced as they rode made his chest ache. "Tell me about him," Eliza said as they stopped to water the horses. "Your father. He was stubborn, proud, worked himself half to death building this ranch from nothing." Jack smiled faintly. "He would have liked you." "How do you know?" "Because you're just as stubborn as he was." They reached Silver Creek late the next afternoon, exhausted and dusty. The bank manager, a nervous man named Pettigrew, looked at them over his spectacles. "Holden. Haven't seen that name in years. Your father was a good man." "I need to access his safety deposit box," Jack said. Pettigrew's face fell. "Ah, yes. About that." Jack's blood went cold. "What?" "There was a man here last week. Said he was settling your father's estate. He had papers, proper documentation. We released the box contents to him." "What did this man look like?" "Tall, well-dressed, had a scar on his left hand." "Henry Williamson," Eliza breathed. Jack slammed his hand on the counter. "You gave my father's papers to a stranger. He had documentation, legal papers with signatures and seals. All forged, you idiot, just like everything else he's done." Jack was shouting now, and people in the bank were staring. "Those were the only proof I had that my land was mine, the only thing that could save my ranch, and you just handed them over to a criminal." Pettigrew went white. I didn't know. I thought—" But Jack was already walking out, his hands shaking with rage. Eliza followed, and they stood in the street, the sun beating down on them, their last hope evaporated. "It's over," Jack said quietly. "We've got nothing left to fight with." Eliza grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "We've got each other, and that's not nothing." "It's not enough." "Then we'll make it enough." Her eyes blazed. "I didn't give up everything just to watch you give up now. We're going to figure this out. We're going to find Henry. We're going to get those papers back, and we're going to save our home." How he could be anywhere, Mexico, California, Canada. "Then we start looking." She grabbed his hand. "Come on." She dragged him to the sheriff's office, where a grizzled old lawman named Wade listened to their story with growing interest. "Williamson, huh?" Wade leaned back in his chair. "Funny you should mention him. Had a telegram this morning about a man matching his description trying to board a train in Prescott." "Prescott's 3 days' ride from here," Jack said. "4 if you don't kill your horses getting there." Wade stood. "But if you're willing to take that risk, I'll wire ahead. Tell them to hold him if they can." Jack looked at Eliza. "It's dangerous. The trail through the canyon country." "I don't care about the danger. I care about our home." They rode out within the hour, pushing their horses harder than Jack liked. The first day was brutal, the second worse. They barely slept, eating cold jerky and drinking from streams, their bodies aching with exhaustion. On the third day, Eliza's horse went lame. "No, no, no," she whispered, dismounting to check the leg. The mare's foreleg was swollen, favoring it badly. "She can't keep going. We'll have to double up," Jack said. "My horse can carry us both if we lighten the load." They abandoned everything they could spare and rode on together, but Jack's horse was flagging badly. They were still half a day from Prescott when the sun started to set. "We're not going to make it," Jack said, the words bitter as ash. "Yes, we are." Eliza's voice was steel. "We didn't come this far to fail now." They rode through the night, Eliza's arms wrapped around Jack's waist, both of them swaying with exhaustion. When dawn broke, Prescott appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Jack's horse stumbled into town and nearly collapsed. Jack and Eliza half fell from the saddle, running on nothing but sheer will toward the train station. "Has there been a man here?" Jack gasped to the station master. Tall, well-dressed, scar on his left hand. The station master looked them over. "You the folks Wade wired about?" "Yes. Is he here?" "Was." Caught the morning train about 2 hours ago. Jack wanted to scream. They'd missed him by 2 hours. 2 hours. Wait, the station master said. Before he left, he gave me something. Said if anyone came asking to give them this. He handed Jack a leather satchel. Jack opened it with shaking hands. Inside were his father's papers. The original deed, the land grant, everything they needed. And a letter. Jack recognized Henry's handwriting immediately. Holden, by the time you read this, I'll be long gone. I took your father's papers intending to destroy them to make sure you lost everything the way I did. But I couldn't do it. Spite has its limits even for me. So here's your proof. Save your ranch, build your life, and know that somewhere out there, I'm trying to do the same. Maybe in another life, we could have been friends. In this one, we'll have to settle for not being enemies. H.W. Jack read the letter twice before it sank in. He gave them back. Henry gave them back. Eliza sagged against him, tears streaming down her face. We can go home. They wired Deputy Marshal Carson, who met them back in Cactus Hill with the bank's lawyer. The original deeds proved everything Jack's father had owned the land free and clear years before Henry's scheme began. The forged loan was nullified, and the seizure order was lifted. Your ranch is yours, Mr. Holden, the lawyer said, legally and completely. Jack couldn't speak. After everything, after nearly losing it all they'd won. But the celebration was short-lived. When they returned to the ranch, they found Samuel waiting with a grim expression. What now? Jack asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. It's Marcus, your father-in-law. He's sick, Eliza. Real sick. Pneumonia. He's asking for you. Eliza went white. Where is he? Philadelphia, but the doctors say he might not. Samuel stopped. They say you should come soon, if you want to see him. I have to go, Eliza said immediately. Jack, I have to. I know. We'll leave tomorrow. Jack, you can't leave the ranch. Not after everything we just went through to save it. The ranch will be here when we get back. Your father might not be. He took her hands. We go together. No arguments. They took the train east, watching the landscape change from brown plains to green hills to bustling cities. Eliza stared out the window the entire time, her face pale with worry. What if he's already? She started, but couldn't finish. He's not. He's waiting for you. They arrived in Philadelphia 3 days later and went straight to the boarding house where Marcus was staying. The landlady, a kindly woman named Mrs. Brennan, led them upstairs. He's been asking for you every day, she said softly. Hasn't given up hope that you'd come. Marcus lay in bed, his face gaunt and pale, his breathing labored. But when Eliza walked in, his eyes opened and something like joy crossed his features. Eliza, he whispered. You came. She knelt beside the bed, taking his hand. Of course I came. I'm here, Father. I'm right here. I'm sorry. He said, his voice weak. For everything. For not seeing what you needed. For trying to control your life instead of trusting you to live it. I know. I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago. Marcus looked at Jack standing in the doorway. You, Holden, come here. Jack approached the bed, unsure what to expect. You take care of her. Marcus said, his grip surprisingly strong when he grabbed Jack's wrist. You keep her safe. You make her happy. Promise me. I promise. Good. Marcus settled back against the pillows. Then I can rest easy. They stayed with him for 3 days. Eliza never left his side, holding his hand, telling him stories about the ranch, about their life in Cactus Hill, about the future she and Jack were building. On the 3rd night, Marcus squeezed her hand and said, I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I should have said it sooner, but I'm proud of the woman you've become. Don't talk like that, Eliza said, tears streaming. You're going to get better. You're going to come visit the ranch like you promised. You're going to... Eliza. His voice was gentle. "It's all right. I made my peace. I made things right with you. That's all I needed." He closed his eyes, and Eliza knew. "I love you, Father," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." Marcus Matthews died peacefully just before dawn with his daughter's hand in his and forgiveness in his heart. They buried him in Philadelphia in the family plot beside Eliza's mother. Eliza stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and silent, while Jack held her hand. "He waited for me," she said quietly. "He held on just long enough to make sure we were all right." "He loved you." "I know." Her voice broke. "I know." They stayed in Philadelphia for another week settling Marcus's affairs. There wasn't much he'd given everything to save their ranch. But Eliza found letters, dozens of them, that Marcus had written but never sent. Letters apologizing, explaining, trying to make her understand why he'd made the choices he'd made. "He never stopped thinking about me," Eliza said, reading through them. "Even when he was angry, even when he thought I'd betrayed him, he never stopped loving me." "That's what fathers do," Jack said gently. On their last day in Philadelphia, Eliza asked to visit the old family home. It had been sold months ago, but the new owners let them walk through one last time. Eliza stood in the parlor where she'd grown up, running her hand along the mantelpiece. "I thought I'd feel sad," she said. "But I don't. This isn't home anymore." "What is—" She turned to him, and in her eyes, Jack saw everything he needed to know. "You are. Wherever you are, that's home." They took the train back to Cactus Hill, and when they finally rode up to the ranch, Eliza let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. "We're really here," she said. "We're really home." "We are." Jack helped her dismount. "And we're not losing it again. Not to Henry, not to the bank, not to anyone. Promise. Promise." That night, lying in bed, Eliza said, "My father gave us this ranch, you know. In a way, if he hadn't given up everything to save us, we would have lost it before we even had a chance to fight." "He gave you more than that," Jack said. "He gave you closure, peace, a chance to say goodbye." "I'm glad he met you," Eliza whispered. "I'm glad he knew I was loved." Jack pulled her close, and they lay in the darkness. Two people who'd fought for everything they had and won. But the war wasn't over yet. Not quite. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks after they buried Marcus, when Samuel rode up looking like he'd seen a ghost. "There's a woman in town asking about Eliza," he said without preamble. "Says she's family." Eliza looked up from the washing. "That's impossible. My mother died years ago. I have no other family except my sister, and she's in Boston. This woman says her name is Catherine Matthews. Says she's your father's sister." Jack saw Eliza go pale. "My father didn't have a sister." "Well, she's got papers that say otherwise. And she's threatening legal action." "Legal action for what?" Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "Your father's estate. She says, as his only living relative, everything he owned should go to her, not you." "That's insane," Jack said. "Marcus left everything to Eliza in his will." "Did he?" Samuel asked gently. "Because Catherine's lawyer is saying there's no will. And without one, the law says his assets go to his next of kin, which, if she's really his sister, would be her." Eliza sat down hard on the porch steps. "But he had nothing left. He gave it all up to save us." "That's what we thought," Samuel said. "But turns out your father had an insurance policy. $10,000. Pays out on death." Jack's head spun. 10,000. And Catherine Matthews wants every penny. They rode into town that afternoon to face this supposed aunt. Catherine Matthews sat in the hotel parlor like a queen holding court 50 years old, dressed in expensive black mourning clothes, her face sharp and calculating. "Eliza," she said, standing. "My dear niece, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Who are you?" Eliza asked coldly. My father never mentioned a sister. We were estranged, a family disagreement years ago. But blood is blood, and when I heard about dear Marcus's passing, I felt it was my duty to come. Your duty to claim his money, you mean? Catherine's smile didn't waver. The law is clear, my dear. Without a will, Marcus's assets come to me as his next of kin. I'm his daughter. That makes me his next of kin. Actually, in Pennsylvania, siblings inherit before married daughters. It's all quite legal. She pulled out a document. I have our birth certificates right here, proof of our relationship. Eliza snatched the papers, studying them with Jack looking over her shoulder. They looked legitimate, 2 children born to the same parents, Marcus and Catherine, 18 months apart. This doesn't make sense, Eliza said. My father would have told me. Perhaps he was ashamed. Our falling out was quite severe. I married against his wishes, and we never spoke again. Catherine dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. But I loved my brother. And now that he's gone, I want to honor his memory by managing his estate properly. By taking his daughter's inheritance. By ensuring it goes where it legally belongs. Catherine's voice hardened. My lawyer will be filing papers tomorrow. Unless, of course, you'd like to settle this quietly. I'm willing to offer you $2,000 for any emotional claim you might have. Get out, Jack said quietly. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of this hotel, get out of this town, and take your legal papers with you. Catherine stood, drawing herself up. You can't speak to me that way. I just did. And if you're still here when the sun sets, I'll have the sheriff escort you to the county line. The sheriff has no authority over legitimate legal matters. Maybe not, but he has authority over con artists and frauds. And lady, you smell like both. Catherine's face flushed with anger. You'll regret this, both of you. When my lawyer is finished, you won't have a penny to your names. She swept out, and Eliza turned to Jack. What if she's telling the truth? What if she really is my father's sister? Then we'll deal with it, but I don't trust her for a second. They spent the next 2 days trying to verify Catherine's story. Jack sent telegrams to Philadelphia, to Marcus's old business associates, to anyone who might have known about a sister. Every response came back the same. Marcus Matthews was an only child. She's lying, Jack told Eliza. Those birth certificates are fake. But how do we prove it? Samuel had the answer. The county recorder in Philadelphia. If those birth certificates are real, they'll have the originals on file. If they're fake, there won't be any record. Jack was on the next train east. He rode hard for Philadelphia, arriving exhausted but determined. The county recorder's office was a musty building that smelled of old paper and bureaucracy. I need to verify a birth certificate, Jack told the clerk, sliding Catherine's document across the desk. The clerk studied it, then disappeared into the stacks. He returned 20 minutes later, shaking his head. There's no record of a Catherine Matthews born on this date. In fact, there's no record of any Catherine born to these parents at all. What about Marcus Matthews? Can you verify his birth certificate? The clerk checked. Yes, Marcus James Matthews, born April 15, 1818. Only child of William and Sarah Matthews. Jack felt triumph surge through him. I need official documentation of that. Something that will hold up in court. That'll cost you $5? Jack paid it gladly. When he returned to Cactus Hill 3 days later, he found chaos. Catherine hadn't waited for her lawyer. She'd gone straight to the territorial court and filed an emergency injunction, freezing all of Marcus's assets, including the insurance policy. She can't do that, Eliza said, reading the court order with shaking hands. She already did. The lawyer they'd hired, a young man named Benjamin Pierce, said grimly. And unless we can prove fraud, that money stays frozen until the court rules. I can prove fraud. Jack pulled out the documents from Philadelphia. Marcus Matthews was an only child. Catherine's birth certificate is fake. Pierce's eyes lit up. This is good. This is very good. I can file a motion to dismiss based on this evidence. How long will that take? Could be weeks. Could be months. Courts move slow. We don't have months, Eliza said. That insurance money was supposed to help us rebuild, to make up for everything my father lost. Then we push for an expedited hearing, Pierce said. Argue that Catherine's filing was made in bad faith with fraudulent documents. If the judge agrees, we might get a ruling within a week. The hearing was set for 6 days later. Catherine showed up with her lawyer, a slick man from Denver named Hartwell, who spoke in smooth, confident tones about property rights and legal precedents. But when Pierce presented the official records from Philadelphia proving Catherine's documents were fake, Hartwell's confidence cracked. "Your Honor," he said quickly, "my client was clearly misinformed. She believed in good faith that these documents were authentic." "Your client committed fraud," Pierce shot back. "She presented forged documents to this court in an attempt to steal a dead man's estate from his rightful heir." The judge, a stern woman named Blackwood, looked at Catherine over her spectacles. "Mrs. Matthews, or whoever you really are, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Catherine's face had gone white. I was told these papers were real. I didn't know they were fake." "Who told you they were real?" "A man in Denver. He said he could help me claim my brother's estate." "What was this man's name?" Catherine hesitated. "I don't remember." "How convenient." Judge Blackwood shuffled the papers. "I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. The injunction is lifted, and all assets are to be released to Eliza Holden née Matthews as the sole legitimate heir. Furthermore, Mrs. She paused. "What is your real name?" "Catherine Reynolds," the woman admitted in a small voice. "Mrs. Reynolds, you are hereby ordered to pay court costs and attorney fees for the defendant. If you fail to do so within 30 days, a warrant will be issued for your arrest on charges of fraud and forgery. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." Catherine Reynolds left the courthouse a broken woman. Jack felt no sympathy. She'd tried to steal from a grieving daughter, and she'd gotten exactly what she deserved. Outside, Eliza collapsed against Jack, her body shaking. "It's really over. It's really over." The insurance money arrived 2 weeks later. $10,000 more money than Jack had ever seen in his life. Eliza stared at the bank draft, tears streaming down her face. "My father did this for me," she whispered. "Even when we weren't speaking, even when he thought I'd betrayed him, he made sure I'd be taken care of." "He loved you," Jack said simply. "That's what love does." They used the money wisely. Paid off every debt they had, bought new cattle to rebuild the herd, hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. For the first time since their wedding, they could breathe without worrying about where the next meal would come from. But money didn't solve everything. The town still treated them with cold suspicion. Mrs. Henderson still refused to serve Eliza at the general store. The minister still looked at them like they were sinners every Sunday. "I don't understand," Eliza said one night, frustration evident in her voice. "We proved we weren't criminals. We saved the ranch legally. What more do they want?" "Time," Jack said. "People need time to forget." "How much time?" "It's been 6 months, Jack. 6 months of being treated like we're diseased." "I know." "Do you, because you were born here? You have Samuel and a few others who'll talk to you. But me, I'm still the Philadelphia woman who destroyed Henry Williamson's life." Jack didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. The town had never fully accepted her. Then on a cold November morning, everything changed. Jack was in town buying supplies when he heard the screams. He ran toward the sound and found a crowd gathering near the schoolhouse. Smoke poured from the windows, and inside, children were crying. "The teacher's trapped," someone yelled. "She went back for the children who couldn't get out." Jack didn't think. He ran into the burning building, smoke stinging his eyes, heat pressing against his skin. He found Miss Sarah Cooper, the schoolteacher, unconscious near the back door. 2 small children huddled beside her. He grabbed all 3, dragging them toward the exit. His lungs burned. His eyes watered, and for a moment he thought he wouldn't make it. Then, hands grabbed him, pulling him out into the cold air. He collapsed on the ground, coughing violently, while someone tended to Miss Cooper and the children. "Jack!" Eliza's voice frantic. She'd heard about the fire and come running. "Jack, are you all right?" "Fine," he croaked. "The kids? They're alive. You saved them." The whole town had gathered now. And as Jack lay there struggling to breathe, he saw something shift in their faces. Not just gratitude, understanding. Mrs. Henderson knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. "You could have died." "Couldn't let those kids burn," Jack managed. "No, I suppose you couldn't." She looked at Eliza. "You've got a good man there, Mrs. Holden." It was the first kind thing she'd said to Eliza in 6 months. Over the next few weeks, the town's attitude slowly changed. Not all at once, people didn't suddenly love them. But the cold shoulders became nods. The whispers became conversations. The isolation became community. "They're finally seeing you for who you are," Eliza said one Sunday after church, where 3 different families had invited them to dinner. "No," Jack corrected. "They're finally seeing us, together, and realizing we're not the villains they made us out to be." That Christmas was the first time Jack and Eliza felt truly at home in Cactus Hill. They hosted a dinner at the ranch, and Samuel came with his family, and a few other neighbors showed up too. "To new beginnings," Samuel toasted, raising his glass. "To family," Eliza added, her hand finding Jack's under the table. "To love," Jack said quietly. "The kind that survives everything." But in January, another challenge arrived, this time in the form of an opportunity. A railroad company representative named Anderson came to Cactus Hill with a proposal. They wanted to run a line through the territory, and the route they'd chosen went straight through the Holden Ranch. "We're prepared to offer you $15,000 for the right-of-way," Anderson said, spreading maps across Jack's kitchen table. "It's more than fair compensation." Jack looked at the maps, his stomach sinking. The proposed route would cut the ranch in half, destroying their best grazing land. "No," he said. "I'm sorry. I said no. Find another route." Anderson's expression hardened. "Mr. Holden, be reasonable. This railroad is coming through one way or another. You can take our generous offer, or you can fight us in court and lose everything." "Then I'll fight you in court." "Jack," Eliza said carefully, "maybe we should consider—" "No. This land is ours. We fought for it. We saved it. And I'll be damned if I let some railroad company destroy it for profit." After Anderson left, Eliza turned to Jack. "That was a lot of money." "I don't care about the money." "I know you don't. But Jack, if they're determined to build through here, they will. And if we fight and lose, we'll have nothing." "Then we fight and win." "How?" "We're 2 people against a railroad company. They have lawyers, money, political connections. And we have something they don't," Jack said. "We have the law on our side. They can't just take our land without proving it's necessary. And I'm betting there are other routes they could use if we push back hard enough." They hired Benjamin Pierce again, who filed an injunction blocking the railroad's survey of their land. The railroad company responded by filing a motion of eminent domain, arguing that the public good outweighed private property rights. "This is going to get ugly," Pierce warned. "Railroad companies don't like being told no." He was right. Over the next 2 months, the railroad tried everything. They sent representatives to intimidate Jack and Eliza. They spread rumors about the ranch being unsafe. They even tried to bribe the county surveyor to falsify his reports. But Jack and Eliza held firm. Then in March, they got unexpected help. Henry Williamson sent a telegram. "Heard about your railroad trouble. I have information that might help. The company's using fraudulent surveys to justify their route. I have proof. Can send if needed. Consider it payment for the papers I returned. H.W." Jack stared at the telegram for a long moment. Then he showed it to Eliza. "He's trying to make amends," she said softly. "After everything he did. People change, Jack. You taught me that." They wired back, "Send proof." Henry's evidence arrived a week later. Survey documents showing the railroad company had deliberately falsified reports to make their preferred route seem like the only option. when in fact there were 3 other viable paths that wouldn't require taking anyone's land through eminent domain. Pierce took the evidence to court, and the judge ruled in their favor. The railroad company was forced to abandon their route through the Holden Ranch and choose an alternate path. "We won," Eliza said, holding the court order. "We actually won." "We did," Jack agreed. "Thanks to Henry of all people." That night, Jack wrote a letter he never thought he'd write. "Williamson, thank you for the help. I don't know where you are or what you're doing now, but I hope you've found some peace. You could have let them destroy us, but you didn't. That counts for something. If you ever decide to stop running and face what you did, you'll find friends here willing to give you a second chance. Holden." He never received a reply. But somehow, Jack felt like Henry had gotten the message. Spring came to Cactus Hill with rain and new grass, and for the first time since their wedding, Jack and Eliza could look at their ranch and see nothing but possibility. "What should we do with all this land?" Eliza asked one evening, standing on the porch and watching the sun set over the valley. "Build," Jack said. "A bigger house, maybe. Room for—" He stopped. Room for what? Jack looked at her and suddenly he knew. Room for a family. Eliza's hand went to her stomach, and Jack saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "I wanted to be sure before I told you. But Jack, we're going to have a baby." Jack couldn't speak, couldn't move. Everything they'd been through, everything they'd fought for, suddenly crystallized into this single perfect moment. "A baby," he finally managed. "Are you happy?" He pulled her into his arms. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. That night, lying in bed with Eliza curled against him, Jack thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The choice she'd made to leave Henry, the sacrifices Marcus had made to save them, the challenges they'd faced and overcome together. And he realized something fundamental: their story wasn't about the obstacles. It was about the choice to keep fighting despite them. Love wasn't easy. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes it cost more than you wanted to pay. But it was worth it. Every single time, it was worth it. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing all at once. Eliza bloomed with it, her face glowing despite the morning sickness that kept her bent over a bucket for the first 3 months. Jack hovered like a nervous hawk, jumping at every wince, every tired sigh. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Eliza said one morning when Jack tried to stop her from feeding the chickens. "I know that. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I just want to make sure you're safe. I'm safe. I'm healthy. And I'm going to lose my mind if you don't let me do something other than sit on this porch." Jack relented, but only a little. He still watched her like she might disappear if he looked away too long. By June, Eliza's belly was starting to show, and the town's attitude had shifted completely. Women who'd once crossed the street to avoid her now stopped to offer advice, remedies, predictions about whether it would be a boy or a girl. "They finally accept me," Eliza said to Jack one night. "It only took getting pregnant. They accepted you before that. The pregnancy just gave them an excuse to be nice about it." "Is that what you think?" "I think people need a reason to change their minds. A baby's as good a reason as any." But not everyone was happy about the news. In July, a letter arrived from Boston. Eliza's sister Margaret, who hadn't written in over a year, suddenly had plenty to say. "She wants to visit," Eliza said, staring at the letter with an expression Jack couldn't read. "That's good, isn't it?" "I don't know. Margaret and I haven't spoken since the wedding. She thought I was making a mistake marrying you instead of Henry. And now she says she wants to meet her brother-in-law and see where I'm living." Eliza's voice was tight. "She's coming whether I invite her or not." Margaret arrived 2 weeks later on the afternoon train, looking every inch the proper Boston lady in her traveling suit and feathered hat. She was older than Eliza by 5 years, with the same brown eyes but a harder edge to her mouth. "Eliza," she said, embracing her sister stiffly. "You look pregnant." "I am pregnant." Yes, I can see that. Margaret turned to Jack. You must be the infamous Mr. Holden. Just Jack is fine. Is it? Margaret looked him up and down, her assessment clear in her expression. Well, Jack, I hope you understand that I'm here to ensure my sister is being properly cared for. She's being cared for just fine, Jack said evenly. We'll see about that. The first 2 days were tense. Margaret found fault with everything: the small cabin, the simple meals, the lack of proper servants or society. How can you live like this? She asked Eliza while Jack was out working. You were raised better than this. I was raised to think material things mattered more than they do, Eliza shot back. I'm happy here, Margaret. Happier than I ever was in Philadelphia. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're living in a shack in the middle of nowhere with a man who can barely provide for you. Jack provides everything I need. What about what you deserve? What about the life Father wanted for you? Father wanted me to be happy, Eliza said, her voice shaking. And before he died, he told me he was proud of the choice I made. Can you say the same? Margaret had no answer for that. But on the third day, something changed. Jack was teaching Eliza how to break in a new horse, gently given her condition, when the horse spooked and reared. Eliza stumbled backward, and Jack caught her, but not before Margaret saw what could have happened. You let her work with horses. Margaret's voice was sharp with fear. In her condition. She's careful, Jack said, and she knows what she's doing. She could have been hurt. The baby could have been. But I wasn't, Eliza interrupted. Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not a child. I know my limits. That night, Margaret sat on the porch with Jack while Eliza slept. I was wrong about you, Margaret said quietly. Jack looked at her in surprise. What? When Eliza wrote and told me she'd married you instead of Henry Williamson, I thought she'd lost her mind. I thought you were some opportunist who'd taken advantage of her situation. Margaret paused. But watching you with her these past few days, the way you look at her, the way you protect her without smothering her, I was wrong. Thank you for saying that. Don't thank me yet. I'm still not sure this life is what's best for her, but I can see that you love her, and that counts for something. It counts for everything, Jack said. Margaret left the next morning, but before she boarded the train, she pulled Eliza aside. I'm sorry, Margaret said, for not supporting your choice, for judging you without understanding. I forgive you. Will you write to me? Tell me when the baby comes. Of course. And Eliza, Margaret's voice cracked. Father was right. You are braver than all of us. The summer passed in a blur of preparation. Jack built a cradle, sanded and polished until it gleamed. Eliza sewed tiny clothes, her fingers cramping but never stopping. Samuel's wife Martha brought over baby blankets and advice that ranged from helpful to terrifying. The birth is the easy part, Martha said one afternoon. It's the years after that'll test you. That's not reassuring, Eliza said. Wasn't meant to be reassuring. Was meant to be honest. In September, when Eliza was 8 months along, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was young, maybe 20, with nervous eyes and a letter clutched in his hand. I'm looking for Jack Holden, he said. You found him. The young man dismounted, his hands shaking as he held out the letter. I was asked to deliver this. The man who gave it to me, he said it was important. Jack took the letter, his stomach dropping when he saw the handwriting. Henry Williamson. Holden, I'm dying. Consumption. The doctors give me maybe 6 months. I'm in a sanitarium in Colorado Springs, and there are things I need to say to you and Eliza before I go. If you can find it in your hearts to come, I'd be grateful. If not, I understand. But I'm asking anyway. H.W. Jack read the letter twice, then showed it to Eliza. He's dying, she whispered. Says he is. We have to go. Eliza, you're 8 months pregnant. You can't travel to Colorado. Then you go without me. I'm not leaving you when you're this close to giving birth. Eliza took the letter from his hands. Jack, that man gave us back our ranch. He could have destroyed us, but he chose not to. The least we can do is hear what he has to say. What if it's a trap? It's not a trap. He's dying and he wants to make peace. I understand that better than anyone. They argued for hours, but in the end, Eliza won. Jack would go to Colorado Springs, but only if Samuel stayed at the ranch with Eliza and Martha checked on her daily. I don't like this, Jack said as he packed. I know, but it's the right thing to do. The journey to Colorado Springs took 4 days. Jack pushed hard, driven by the need to get back to Eliza as quickly as possible. When he finally reached the sanitarium, a stark white building set against the mountains, his nerves were shot. Henry was in a private room, propped up in bed, looking nothing like the robust man Jack remembered. He'd lost at least 30 pounds, his face was gaunt, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. "You came," Henry rasped. "You asked." "I wasn't sure you would." Henry gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." Jack sat uncomfortable in the sterile room that smelled of medicine and death. "I don't have much time," Henry said. "The doctors are being optimistic with 6 months. I'd be surprised if I make it to Christmas." He coughed, a rattling sound that made Jack wince. "I needed to tell you some things before I go." "I'm listening." "First, I'm sorry for everything. For trying to take your ranch, for the embezzlement scheme that nearly destroyed you, for being so consumed by my own hurt that I couldn't see straight." Henry's eyes were wet. "I was a fool, Jack. A bitter, angry fool who hurt everyone around him." "You made it right in the end," Jack said quietly. "The papers, you returned the evidence against the railroad that counted for something." "Did it? Because I still destroyed lives. Your father-in-law died broke because of what I did. Marcus died at peace with his daughter. That's more than most people get." Henry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How is Eliza?" "Pregnant. Due in about a month." Something flickered across Henry's face. Pain, regret, acceptance. "I'm glad. She deserves that happiness." "She does." "Tell me something, Jack. Do you ever regret it? Taking her from me?" Jack thought about all the challenges they'd faced, all the obstacles they'd overcome. "Not for a second." "Good. That's good." Henry coughed again, harder this time. A nurse appeared, checking his vitals, adjusting his pillows. When she left, Henry continued, "There's something else. Something I need you to have." He pointed to a satchel on the table. Jack opened it and found papers, dozens of them. Deeds, titles, bank records. "I've been trying to make amends," Henry said. "Paying back everyone I stole from. Most of my assets are gone now, liquidated to repay debts. But there's one thing left, a piece of land north of your ranch. Good grazing, reliable water. I'm deeding it to you and Eliza." "Henry, we can't." "You can, and you will. It's the only thing I can do to make up for what I took from you." His voice was firm despite the weakness. "Let me die knowing I did at least one thing right." Jack looked at the deed, his throat tight. The land was worth thousands of dollars, enough to expand the ranch, to secure their future, to give their child something to inherit. "Thank you," Jack said simply. "Don't thank me. Just live well, love her well. And when your children ask about the land, tell them it came from a man who learned too late that love matters more than pride." Jack stayed for another hour talking about nothing important, just two men who'd been enemies finding a strange peace at the end. When he finally stood to leave, Henry grabbed his hand. "Tell Eliza I'm sorry. Tell her I hope she knows I wished her nothing but happiness." "I will." "And Jack, you were right that day. She was worth fighting for." Jack rode back to Cactus Hill faster than he'd ever ridden, driven by a desperate need to get home to Eliza. He arrived 6 days after he'd left to find the ranch in chaos. "She's in labor," Samuel said, meeting him at the door. "Started this morning. Martha's with her now." Jack burst into the bedroom to find Eliza drenched in sweat, her face twisted in pain. Martha looked up, relief clear in her expression. "About time you got back," Martha said. "She's been asking for you." Jack took Eliza's hand, and she gripped it so hard he thought she might break his fingers. "You made it," she gasped. "I made it. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The labor lasted another 8 hours. 8 hours of Eliza's screams, of Martha's calm instructions, of Jack feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. Finally, as the sun was setting, their daughter was born. She came into the world crying, pink and furious and perfect. Martha cleaned her and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her in Eliza's arms. "She's beautiful," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, she's perfect." Jack looked at his daughter, at her tiny fingers, her shock of dark hair, her eyes that were already trying to focus, and felt something shift in his chest. Love, yes, but more than that. Purpose. Future. Everything he and Eliza had fought for distilled into 7 pounds of squalling humanity. "What should we name her?" Eliza asked. Jack thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. "Sarah," he said, "after my mother, and Catherine after yours." "Sarah Catherine Holden," Eliza said, testing the name. "It's perfect." That night, after Martha had gone home and the baby was sleeping in her cradle, Jack and Eliza lay in bed exhausted, but unable to look away from their daughter. "I saw Henry," Jack said quietly, and told her everything, the apology, the land, the final goodbye. Eliza was silent for a long moment. "I'm glad you went. He deserved the chance to make peace. He said to tell you he was sorry, and that he hoped you knew he wished you nothing but happiness. I do know, and I forgive him." She looked at Sarah, sleeping peacefully. "We all make choices, Jack. Some are right, some are wrong. But the ones we make out of love, those are the ones that matter." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Jack learned to change diapers, to walk the floor at 3 in the morning, when Sarah wouldn't stop crying, to function on 2 hours of sleep, and he loved every second of it. In November, they received word that Henry Williamson had died peacefully in his sleep. Jack and Eliza attended a small memorial service, standing in the back, saying a quiet goodbye to a man who'd been both their greatest obstacle and, in the end, one of their most unexpected allies. That winter was hard, but good. The ranch prospered with the new land Henry had given them. The town had fully accepted them. Now Sarah's birth had cemented their place in the community in a way nothing else could have. And one cold December morning, a letter arrived from Margaret. "I'm getting married," Eliza read aloud. "To a bookshop owner in Boston. Nothing glamorous, nothing fancy. But he makes me laugh, and I've decided that's worth more than all the prestige in the world. You were braver than me, Eliza. You showed me it was possible to choose love over expectation. Thank you for that." "Your sister's getting married for love," Jack said, grinning. "Who would have thought?" "People change," Eliza said. "You taught me that." 5 years passed in what felt like a blink. Sarah grew into a wild, fearless child who could ride a horse before she could read, and had her mother's sharp eyes and her father's stubborn heart. They had 2 more children, a son named Marcus and another daughter named Hope. The ranch expanded, prospered, became one of the most successful in the territory. Jack and Eliza built a bigger house with room for their growing family and the occasional visitor. Samuel and Martha became like family, their children growing up alongside the Holden kids. The town that had once shunned them now looked to them as pillars of the community. But through it all, through the successes and the challenges, the joys and the sorrows, Jack never forgot that moment when Eliza had stepped off that carriage and into his life. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset over the valley. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" Eliza asked. "If I'd married Henry like I was supposed to." "Sometimes," Jack admitted, "but not with regret. Never with regret." "Me neither," She leaned against him. "You know what I think about instead?" "What?" "I think about that day you offered to ride with me, when you could have just walked away and let me punch Tom Baker. That's the moment that changed everything." "No," Jack said. "The moment that changed everything was when you chose yourself over everyone else's expectations. That's when I knew you were the woman I'd been waiting for my whole life." Eliza turned to face him, and in her eyes, Jack saw everything they'd built together. "I love you, Jack Holden. More than I did the day I married you, and less than I will tomorrow. I love you too." They kissed, and in that moment, Jack understood something fundamental about their story. It wasn't about a runaway bride or a scandal that rocked a town. It wasn't about stolen land or dying men seeking redemption. It wasn't even about love conquering all, because love didn't conquer anything. It simply existed constant and true through every challenge they faced. Their story was about choice. The choice to be brave when it was easier to be safe. The choice to fight when it was easier to surrender. The choice to love when it was easier to walk away. And that choice made every single day through good times and bad, through triumph and tragedy, that was what had built this life. Jack looked at his children playing in the yard of the home he'd built with his own hands. He looked at his wife, the woman who'd chosen him against all reason and logic. He looked at the land stretching endlessly before them, full of possibility and promise. And he knew with absolute certainty that every obstacle they'd overcome, every sacrifice they'd made, every moment of doubt and fear and pain, all of it had been worth it. Because this family, this love, this life, was everything he'd ever needed and more than he'd ever dared to dream. Sarah Catherine Holden grew up to be a rancher like her father, fierce and independent and unafraid to choose her own path. Marcus became a lawyer who fought for the underdog, carrying on his grandfather's legacy of sacrifice and redemption. Hope became a teacher who taught children that love and courage mattered more than money or status. And when Jack and Eliza were old, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they sat on that same porch and watched another sunset over the valley they'd fought so hard to keep. "Was it worth it?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. Eliza squeezed his hand, her eyes still as sharp and beautiful as the day he'd first seen her. Every single second of it. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. Love wasn't about finding someone who made life easy. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, worth sacrificing, worth choosing every day, even when the world said you shouldn't. Jack Holden and Eliza Matthews chose each other against impossible odds, and in doing so, they built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a legacy of courage, of choosing love over fear, of proving that sometimes the greatest act of bravery is simply refusing to let anyone else decide your destiny. Their story became legend in Cactus Hill, passed down through generations, as proof that real love, the kind that survives scandal and hardship and doubt, doesn't just exist in fairy tales. It exists in the everyday choice to stand beside the person you love through every storm that comes, knowing that together you can weather anything. That was their truth. That was their triumph. And that was the life they built, one brave choice at a time, from the moment she stepped off that carriage and stole his heart until the very end of their days.